I never should have taken the job. That's what I tell myself now. Sitting here, trying to piece together what happened. Trying to figure out if I imagined it all. If I'm just losing my mind, or if I really did see something that shouldn't exist. But I remember it too clearly. The blood. The static on the radio. The thing that was pretending to be a man. I remember everything. It started 3 nights ago. I worked the night shift at Red Rock Gas, a shitty little station in the middle of the Nevada desert, about 60 miles from the nearest town. It's the kind of place where nothing happens. A dead zone on the map. We get a few travelers passing through, but mostly it's truckers, lost tourists, and the kind of people who don't want to be found. It's lonely as hell. No radio stations. No cell service. Just miles of empty roads stretching into the dark, broken only by the weak glow of our flickering neon sign. The boss, Old Man Harris, gave me one rule when I started. You see something weird? Keep your head down. Take the money. Don't ask questions. I thought he was just talking about drifters, maybe the occasional tweaker looking for trouble. I didn't know he meant something else. My shift started at 10 p.m. The sun was long gone by then, and the desert air was freezing. I walked in, grabbed a coffee from the half-broken machine, and settled in behind the counter. Just another quiet night, or so I thought. At 10:27 p.m., the first weird thing happened. The store radio, an old, dusty piece of junk mounted in the corner, turned on by itself. I nearly dropped my coffee. It wasn't music. It wasn't a broadcast. Just a low, crackling static. I turned the volume down. The dial didn't move. I turned it off. Turned itself back on. And then, beneath the static, I heard it. A voice. Faint. Hollow. Like someone was whispering through a bad connection. I leaned in closer, heart hammering. That's when the words came through. Don't let him in. I shut the radio off. Ripped the cord out of the wall. The static stopped. The store was silent again. I laughed it off. Told myself it was just interference. Maybe a trucker's CB radio bleeding through the speakers. But then, at 10:39 p.m., the bell over the door jingled. I looked up. A man had walked in. At least, I think it was a man. He was tall, too tall, with broad shoulders and a stiff, unnatural way of moving. His clothes were dusty, like he'd been walking through the desert for miles. And his face, something about it was off. His features were too symmetrical, his skin too smooth, like a mannequin trying to look human. He walked straight to the counter. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. Cleared my throat. Evening. Need some gas. His mouth opened too slowly. And then he said, in a voice that sounded like it had been copied from somewhere else, I just need to come inside. I felt a chill creep up my spine. That was when I noticed something else. His clothes were wrong. Not just old, out of place. His jeans were faded almost white, like they had been through 100 washes, and his jacket looked like something out of the 1950s. Like it had been stuck in time. I forced a smile. Well, you're already inside, buddy. He didn't react. Didn't blink. Just stood there. And then he said it again. I just need to come inside. The air felt heavy. Like the moment before a thunderstorm. I glanced toward the front door. Still open. The open sign buzzed weakly in the glass. I looked back at the man. He hadn't moved. His mouth was still open. Too wide. Like he was waiting for me to say something. My fingers tightened around the counter. Sir, do you need something, or? The power cut out. The entire station went black. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter. Flicked it on. The beam shook in my hands as I swept it across the store. The man was gone. The door was still open. But he wasn't outside. He wasn't anywhere. I walked around the counter, heart hammering, shining the flashlight over the aisles. Nothing. Just empty shelves and the hum of the generator kicking in. And then, from behind me, right by the counter, a whisper. You already let me in. I spun around. The man was standing inside the counter. Not behind it. Inside it. Like he had faded through the solid wood. His face was different now. His mouth was wider, stretching too far up his cheeks. His eyes were completely black. I stumbled back. My flashlight flickered. What the fuck? The man moved. Not stepped. Not lunged. Shifted. Like he was blinking through space. 1 second, he was behind the counter. The next, he was right in front of me. His breath smelled like nothing. Not bad, not good. Just empty. And then he whispered, in my own voice, "You shouldn't be here." I ran. I didn't think. I sprinted out of the gas station, into the freezing desert night. My breath hitched in my chest as I stumbled onto the road, gravel cutting into my palms. Behind me, the store lights flickered back on. The neon sign buzzed. The radio crackled. Like nothing had ever happened. I turned back, gasping for breath. And through the glass door, behind the counter, I saw myself. Standing there. Staring back. A perfect copy. And then, he smiled. I don't remember running to my car. 1 second, I was inside that station. And the next, I was outside, fumbling with my keys, breath fogging up in the freezing night air. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them. The station lights had come back on. Through the glass, everything looked normal. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just seen something that shouldn't exist. The aisles were still stocked. The cash register was still sitting there, silent. The only thing out of place. The door was wide open. And the desert was silent. Too silent. No wind. No distant hum of the highway. Just me, my car, and the gas station that wasn't letting me leave. I finally got the key in the ignition. The engine stuttered. I cursed under my breath, trying again. The dashboard lights flickered. Then nothing. The battery was dead. That didn't make sense. I had driven here 2 hours ago. My car was fine. There was no reason for it to just die. I sat there for a second, gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding. I could walk. But where? The nearest town was miles away. The road stretched into blackness in both directions. And something about the silence, the way it wrapped around me like a vacuum, made me feel like if I stepped off the station lot, I might not make it very far. I had one option. The landline inside. I didn't want to go back in. Every part of me was screaming not to. But standing out here alone in the dark, with no working car and no cell service, wasn't any better. I took a breath, and then I walked back inside. The second I stepped through the door, the radio came back on. That same low, crackling static. I stopped in my tracks. My pulse slammed against my ribs as I looked around, expecting. What? Someone standing in the aisles? A figure waiting behind the counter? But there was nothing. The station looked just like before. Silent. Empty. But I wasn't stupid. I knew I wasn't alone. The landline was behind the counter. I moved fast, grabbing it off the hook, pressing it to my ear. Dead. No dial tone. I slammed it back down, swearing under my breath. That's when I heard it. A footstep. Not mine. Behind me. I turned so fast I nearly lost my balance. The store was still empty. But something felt different. The air was thick, like I had walked into a room where someone had just been standing a second ago. And the smell, the faintest hint of something metallic. Like blood. My stomach twisted. I needed to get out. Now, I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the aisles. I wasn't gonna run. Not yet. Not until I was outside. Not until I was sure nothing was waiting for me. But then the bell jingled. Someone had stepped inside. A man. Late 50s, maybe, with a weathered face and deep-set eyes. His clothes were dusty, like he'd been driving all night. He looked at me, then around the station. "You all right, son?" I opened my mouth to answer. To say what? That something was wrong? That I needed a ride? That this place wasn't right? But before I could speak, he frowned. His eyes flicked to the floor. Then slowly, back up at me. Like he had just noticed something was missing. Or something wasn't where it should be. Then he turned. Walked right back out. Got into his truck. And drove away. I stood there. Frozen. My blood like ice. What the hell was that? Why did he leave? What did he see? I ran outside, waving my arms. But his taillights were already disappearing down the highway. He wasn't stopping. He wasn't coming back. He had left me here. The second he was gone, everything felt worse. The weight in the air. The feeling that something was about to happen. The kind of quiet that precedes a storm. I looked around. The gas station. The empty road. The vast, endless desert beyond it. I was alone again. Or at least, I thought I was. I turned back toward the station. And that's when I saw the footprints. Not mine. Fresh. In the dirt. Leading away from the front door. Out into the desert. My breath caught in my throat. I had been standing right here. I would have seen someone walk away. But the prints were there. Deep. Clear. Recent. Whoever made them had left while I was inside. Or worse, they had been standing next to me the entire time. And I just hadn't seen them. I stood there, staring at the footprints in the dirt. They weren't mine. But they should have been. They led away from the gas station, straight into the desert, toward nothing but miles of empty land. I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me again. I knew I should go back inside. Lock the doors. Wait for sunrise. But my gut told me something else. If someone had walked away from this place, then maybe they had gotten out. I grabbed a flashlight from under the counter, shoved my phone into my pocket, and followed the prints. The air was colder than before. A dry, sharp kind of cold that made my breath feel thick in my throat. The flashlight's beam wobbled in my hand as I walked. The ground was uneven, the desert stretching out on all sides like a frozen ocean. The prints went straight. Unbroken. No hesitation. Whoever left them had been walking with purpose. But after about 50 feet, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The prints changed. The first few were deep, normal. Like someone pressing into the dirt. But the further I walked, the shallower they got. Until, eventually, they just stopped. Not turned around. Not scattered. Just ended. Like whoever made them had simply vanished. A gust of wind kicked up dust around me. I stood there, heart pounding, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Just the open desert and the gas station glowing behind me. I should have turned back. But then I saw something else. Something I almost missed. A few feet ahead, barely visible in the weak glow of my flashlight. Another set of footprints. Leading back toward the station. I hesitated. Checked the ground around me. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't walked back yet. But these prints? They were fresh. Still crisp in the dirt, untouched by the wind. Exactly like the ones I had just followed. Only now, they were leading back to where I had started. Back to the front door of the station. And the worst part? They were deeper. Like whoever had made them was walking heavier. Or closer. Like they had just been standing right behind me. I didn't think, I ran. I sprinted back toward the station, the flashlight bouncing wildly, the desert crunching under my boots. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. Didn't slow down until I was inside, door locked, hands braced against the counter. I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to think. What the hell had just happened? Had I imagined it? Had the wind shifted the prints? But that didn't explain why they were deeper. Didn't explain why they had followed me back. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and pulled up the camera. I had taken a picture of the footprints before I started walking. I swiped through. There they were. Clear as day. Footprints leading away from the station. Then I swiped to the last photo. The one I had taken right before running back. And my breath caught in my throat. Because now, in that last photo, there were two sets of footprints. Side by side. One mine. And one from someone who had been walking right next to me the whole time. I dropped the phone. Something was wrong with this place. I had felt it all night, but now I knew. It wasn't just the radio static. It wasn't just the broken phone line or the power cutting out. Something was out there. Watching. Moving when I wasn't looking. And now? Now it was closer than ever. I grabbed the landline again. Still dead. I turned to the security monitor above the counter. It showed the usual grainy black and white footage from the cameras outside. The front of the station. The gas pumps. The empty road. But then I saw it. The new set of footprints. Leading from the desert right up to the door. But no one was there. No body. Just the prints stopping at the entrance. Like something was waiting outside. Like it was standing right on the other side of the glass. Watching. I stayed behind the counter. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. The silence was thick. My own heartbeat too loud in my ears. And then, the bell jingled. The door opened. But no one came inside. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? The door hung open, swinging slightly in the cold wind. The footprints had stopped at the threshold. Whoever, whatever, had been standing there hadn't stepped inside. But it had opened the door. I moved slowly, forcing my legs to work, stepping toward the entrance. Outside? Still empty. No movement. Nothing but the prints in the dirt. I swallowed hard. Then, against every instinct screaming in my body, I stepped forward and pulled the door shut, locked it, turned back toward the counter, and froze. Because there, on the counter where I had left my phone, was something that hadn't been there before. Something impossible. A picture. A printed photo, slightly crumpled. I picked it up, hands shaking, and turned it over. It was me, standing outside in the desert, flashlight in hand. A photo taken from right behind me, and in the bottom corner, written in small, smudged letters, "Don't turn around." I stood there, staring at the photo in my hand. A picture of me, taken from behind, out in the desert. Someone had been right there, close enough to see me, close enough to touch me, and I hadn't noticed. But the worst part? The message scrawled at the bottom, "Don't turn around." A gust of wind rattled the windows. The door creaked slightly against the frame. I swallowed hard, my hands clammy against the crumpled photo. I forced myself to breathe. Think. The landline was dead. The road was empty. My car wouldn't start. I had nowhere to go. Nowhere except outside, where someone or something was waiting. I checked the security cameras again. The footprints were still there. But now? Now there were more. Not just leading up to the gas station. Leading away from it. Like something had stepped up to the door, paused, and then dragged something back into the desert. And that's when I saw it. The streaks in the dirt. Dark, heavy drag marks. Like someone had been pulled away. Still fresh. Still wet. My stomach turned. I swallowed back bile. And then, just beyond the glow of the security camera's infrared, something moved. It was low to the ground. Not walking. Crawling. The grainy footage made it impossible to see clearly, but I could tell two things. It wasn't human. It was coming back. I should have locked myself in the back room. Should have hid until sunrise. But I couldn't just sit there. Because someone had been taken. And whatever had dragged them away wasn't finished. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a rusty tire iron from behind the counter. Then I took a breath, unlocked the door, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a punch to the lungs. The air felt thick. Stale. Like something had been rotting nearby. I scanned the ground. The footprints and drag marks were clearer now. They led past the gas pumps, past the flickering glow of the station sign, out into the darkness. I tightened my grip on the tire iron and followed them. The desert stretched endless in every direction. The sand crunched under my boots. The further I walked, the stronger the smell became. Like burnt hair and spoiled meat. And then I saw it. The first piece. A hand. Pale. Bare. Fingers curled inward like a dead spider. Torn clean off at the wrist. The skin around the stump was shredded. Jagged. Like it had been bitten off. I felt something rise in my throat. Forced it down. Then I saw the rest. A trail of flesh. Scattered in chunks. Torn muscle, split bone, something that looked like a jawbone half buried in the dirt. Whatever had been dragged away had been torn apart. And then I saw the body. It was face down. Or at least it should have been. Because where the head should have been, there was nothing. Just a wet, gaping mess of bone and tissue. The spine was still there, jutting out, the edges gnawed on. But the head? Gone. Like it had been ripped clean off. My hands shook. I took a step back, nearly slipping in the pool of blood. That's when I heard it. A wet crunch. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. And something moved. Something hunched over, kneeling in the sand. Its back was to me. Its arms were too long, elbows jutting at sharp angles. It was chewing. The sound of teeth grinding against bone. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Then it stopped. Its shoulders twitched. It knew I was there. And slowly, too slowly, it turned its head. Its mouth was full. Its jaw unhinged, stuffed with something dark and dripping. And in its hands? The missing head. Eyes still open. Still blinking. I felt my body seize. My knees locked. My stomach flipped. Because the head? I recognized it. It was the man from earlier. The one who had walked into the station. The one who had left without saying a word. His lips twitched. His jaw worked like he was still trying to speak. A weak, broken gurgle. And then, the thing swallowed. And it smiled at me. I ran. Didn't look back. Didn't stop until I was inside the station, locking the door behind me. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, my vision blurred with panic. I grabbed the security monitor again. And there it was. Still kneeling in the dirt. Still grinning. But now? It wasn't holding the head anymore. It was holding something else. Something small. A camera. My camera. The one I had dropped earlier when I saw the footprints. And as I watched, it lifted the camera. And it took a picture. A flash of light. A second later, my phone buzzed. A new notification. A photo. I swallowed, my fingers trembling as I opened it. And when I saw it, my entire body went cold. It was me, standing inside the gas station, taken from right outside the glass, and written at the bottom in the same smudged, shaking letters as before, "I can see you." The picture on my phone felt too real. Me, standing inside the station, taken from right outside the glass. And the words scrawled at the bottom, "I can see you." It wasn't a warning. It was a fact. It had been watching me this whole time. And now, it wanted me to know. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The security monitor flickered. The thing was still out there, still holding my camera, still staring right at the station. I needed to do something, needed to get out of here. But my car was dead. The landline was useless. And even if I ran, where would I go? I was trapped. And it knew it. Then, from outside, the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, coming toward the door. I grabbed the tire iron, my grip slick with sweat. My heart slammed against my ribs. The steps stopped. Then, a sound I wasn't expecting. A knock. 3 soft, deliberate knocks on the glass. Like it was asking to come in. I forced myself to look. And what I saw made my stomach twist into a knot. It was a man. Or at least it looked like one. Wearing a jacket and jeans. Dusty from the road. But his face was wrong. Too smooth. Too perfect. Like something had stretched human skin over the shape of a man but hadn't gotten it quite right. And when it spoke, the voice that came out was mine. "You should open the door." I gripped the tire iron tighter. The thing on the other side of the glass tilted its head. Still smiling. Still waiting. Then it lifted something. Held it up for me to see. A set of keys. My keys. The ones I had left in my car. The message was clear. If I wanted to leave, I had to let it in. I had to let it get close. I had to trust it. Like the others had. Like the man I had found torn to pieces in the desert. And I realized, with a sickening twist in my gut, this is how it gets you. I backed away from the door. The thing on the other side didn't move. Didn't knock again. Didn't try to force its way in. It just stood there. Waiting. Because it knew. It knew that sooner or later I would have to leave. That eventually I would get tired. That I would slip. And the second I did, the second I made the wrong move, I would never leave this place. Just like the others. Just like the man in the desert. Just like whoever had worked here before me. Then, from behind the counter, the radio clicked on. A blast of static filled the room. Then, beneath it, a voice. Soft. Faint. But this time, it wasn't mine. It was someone else's. Someone pleading. "Please. Don't let it take you too." The radio hissed. Then silence. I turned back to the door. The thing outside was gone. The keys were gone. But the footprints? Still there. Leading away from the station. Back into the desert. And I knew, deep down, what it was telling me. Follow. I had 2 choices. Stay here in this gas station and wait for whatever was out there to come back. Or go into the dark and find out what was really happening. I don't know why I chose the second option. Maybe because I knew I wouldn't survive the first. I grabbed a flashlight, stepped outside. The desert air was sharp and dry as bone. I followed the footprints, my breath coming fast. My fingers wrapped so tightly around the tire iron they ached. The ground sloped downward, and for the first time I saw it, something big. A structure, barely visible in the weak glow of my flashlight. An old storm drain, maybe a tunnel leading underground. And the footprints, they led inside. I stepped to the edge. A cold gust of air drifted up from the darkness below. And then I heard it. From inside the tunnel. A voice. Soft. Weak. Like someone on the edge of death. "Help me." My stomach twisted. Because I recognized it. The man from the desert. The one I had seen torn to pieces. The one that shouldn't be alive. I raised my flashlight. Shined it into the tunnel. First I saw nothing. Just damp stone. Stretching into the dark. Then, a hand. Reaching toward me. Fingers curled. bloody. A face half hidden in the shadows. Eyes wild. Desperate. He was still alive. Still crawling. Still trying to escape. I took a step back, my pulse hammering. And then, the other hands appeared. Dozens of them. Pale. Too long. Fingers stretching. Reaching from the dark behind him. Grabbing him. Pulling him back. He opened his mouth to scream. And then he was gone. Swallowed by the tunnel. And the last thing I saw before the dark took him? His eyes. Not wild anymore. Not human. Just black. Empty. Like whatever had been inside him had already won. I ran. Didn't stop. Didn't breathe. Didn't look back until I was inside the station. Door locked. Hands shaking. And when I finally turned to look at the security monitor, expecting to see the footprints, expecting to see the tunnel, expecting to see something, there was nothing. No footprints. No blood. No tunnel. Just miles of empty desert. Like it had never been there at all. I don't remember the rest of the night. I must have blacked out because when I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. A car pulled into the station. A sheriff. He stepped inside, nodded at me. "You all right, kid?" I just stared at him. Didn't answer. Because I knew he wouldn't believe me. Wouldn't believe the footprints. The voice on the radio. The thing in the tunnel. And maybe that was the worst part. Because now I knew. I wasn't the first person this had happened to. And I wouldn't be the last. Because out there, in the desert, something was waiting. And one night, it was going to call someone else inside. Just like it had tried to do with me. And maybe next time, the gas station wouldn't let them go. The station isn't haunted. It isn't cursed. It's a trap. And sooner or later, someone else is going to fall into it.